Okay, cool. So we'll wait for about 2 minutes. In 6:05, we'll get kicked off with some questions.
Yeah, sounds great.
Everyone joining us online, just drop us a message in the comments so we can see, who's here and say hi. So we've currently got about 11 people joining us, 4 minutes in. So I've been watching your stuff for a while now, Dan. And I've always wondered one thing.
Okay,
How do you keep your hair like that consistently? Do you like
man,
barber? Do you
it's
do it yourself?
it's so much work. Yeah, I definitely do it myself. But there's a whole routine.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought so.
yeah, it's a lot. So one day I'll make a video on that. Who knows?
It's magnificent. It's
Thanks. It's
akin to like a lion's mane.
I like that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's my African perspective, dissecting your hair there.
I like it. I like it.
Okay, we've
I
got
figure one
Emmanuel.
day. Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
you were gonna say?
I figure one day I might not have it. So while I have it, might as well do something with it.
I mean, it's already turning gray, so you never know, right?
But yeah, that happened long ago. So I started turning
Yeah,
gray when I was 17 or 18. So
you're
it's been a
joking.
while. Yeah, that runs in the family. My dad's hair turned gray when he was 17.
Ah,
So now he has a full head of white hair. But I guess when he was in his 50s, 60s, he had like awesome salt pepper hair. So I'm like,
yeah.
if I look like that, that's not bad at all.
Well, it looks like you are not going to lose your hair then if your dad still has it.
I will
So
say,
you're,
oh,
you're
I hear that hair traits skip a generation. I don't know if that's true or not,
well,
but we'll see. And yeah,
not
and
true.
I never met my
Your
my
grand.
paternal grandfather. So he died before I was born. So who knows? Who knows there?
So we've got Robert, Isaac, Arnulf, and Emmanuel. Thanks, guys, for letting us know you're online. I think we can get started. So thanks for joining us, Dan. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Dan's work. And for those who are not familiar, tell us about yourself, Dan. What are you up to? What have you been up to?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dan Mall. I live in Philadelphia. I'm married. My wife and I met in when we were both in fifth grade. So we've known each other for a long time, from grade school and elementary school. We have two daughters together. We have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old who are wonderful. Um, I'm a designer. I went to design school. I write code, but I don't consider myself a developer because I'm not as good as I'd like to be there, I guess. I've been a creative director. I've worked at agencies. I've started my own agency. I ran my own agency for about 10 years, and I shut that down about 6 months ago. Um, because part of what I realized in running my own agency is that what I like most is not making deliverables for clients, but actually teaching them how to do the stuff that I do. So I decided
Ah,
to try to pursue that a little bit more directly. So that's what I'm doing now, is just trying to teach and figuring out at what scale, on what platforms, who, all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I've been doing the last 6 months, is just figuring out how I can teach people and share the stuff that I've learned in my career.
wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And how did you get into design? Have you always been a designer?
Um, I went to school for animation. Actually, I wanted to be an animator. I saw, I grew up watching Pixar movies. I remember when
Yeah.
Toy Story came out in I think 1990 or 91, something like that, and I was like, "That's what I want to do for the rest of my life." So I used to draw a ton. I used to do animation in Flash and stuff like that. So I went to school to be an animator, and then I realized how difficult that actually was, and I was awful. I was so bad at it. And I was lucky that the program that I was in was only a half animation program. The other half was digital design. And I didn't know what design was when I went to school, when I went to college. I didn't know, I've never heard of graphic design at that point. So I
Right.
discovered all these things like typography and visual communication and graphic design and all that. And I was like, this stuff is cool. And I'm actually pretty good at it. So I discovered design in college, and, the rest is history from there.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So we've got more people online with us. I hope you heard that story about how Dan got into design. And we've got Sylvia, David, Victor from Brazil, Naveen from Pakistan. Amazing. We've got people from all around,
So
which
cool.
actually brings me to my next question about your background. So, is your dad Pakistani or your mom?
So my dad is Pakistani. So I'm mixed. A lot of people who first meet me for the first time, especially when they don't get the mixed thing, I get all sorts of guesses about my ethnicity. So people are like, "Are you Jamaican, or are you Puerto Rican, or are you Hispanic, or are you, what, Sri
Yeah,
Lankan?" And it's because I'm mixed. So my dad is from
yeah.
Pakistan, and my mom is from the Philippines. So I have a pretty interesting. I actually don't know a lot of people in the world who have the same mix as me, other than my brother. But coincidentally, my brother's wife is also half Pakistani, half Filipino.
Oh
So,
wow.
so he married another half Pakistani, half Filipino. So their kids will be half Pakistani, half Filipino.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that's my mix, which I think is a pretty unique mix.
It is. It is. If I was to guess, I would have guessed like the islands, like Fiji, Polynesian.
Right, because the hair. Yeah, I get a lot of like Samoan, Hawaiian, like stuff like
Exactly,
that.
exactly, exactly. Because you look like Maui.
Right. I was
Moana.
Maui for Halloween one year with my kids
There
and my
you
wife.
go.
We dressed up. We did all a Moana themed Halloween.
Yeah, amazing. I totally get that. So, how have your Filipino and Pakistani roots influenced your design journey, if at all?
A ton. As a kid, so like I'm a firm believer in that designers, engineers, like anybody who does what we do, but also just anybody in general, are so shaped by all of the experiences that they've had, from being a kid to being an adult, especially the experiences as a kid. So my experience as a kid, um, being mixed, was that I never felt like I fit in anywhere, right? So I had to get used to um, being on my own a lot, And what I mean by that is like, even in school, social groups, right? I remember being in school, and I went to a pretty ethnically diverse school when I was growing up. And I remember, the white kids sat with the white kids, and the black kids sat with the black kids, and the Korean kids sat with the Korean kids. And I'm like, so where's the like half Pakistani, half Filipino table? Like, where's that? And there
Yeah,
was never that. And so I learned that, like, I don't know that I should expect that, anywhere that I go. And so it made me figure out, like, where do I fit in? Where do I stand out? Where am I okay being by myself? Where are, who are my people if they're not the same race as me? And that's born of both like pride and trauma as well. So it's a combination of all that stuff. I remember when I was young, I was 4 years old, and I visited the Philippines and Pakistan for the first time. And I remember being on the in the Philippines, being on a jeepney with my mom, and I remember the Filipino people pointing at me and calling me Bombay, which is like, Indian kid, right? Like,
oh
and
wow.
so they would, and so then I remember also being in Pakistan, and them and the Pakistani people, being like going on public transit or just being on the street and looking at me and calling me Chinese. So like everywhere, even though places of my own heritage, people
Yeah.
going like, "You're not us," "You're not, you're different than us," And so that's like one of my earliest memories, is like feeling like, oh, I don't belong here. And so that has really shaped a lot of my philosophies. A lot of, like, I'm pretty comfortable being in the minority of things, having the minority of opinions, be like having the minority of people, who are on my side. And I think I hope, I like to say that has perhaps made me more resilient than I would have been otherwise.
Wow, that's amazing. So you must have an interesting perspective around diversity and inclusion when it comes to design. So what's your take on the landscape, especially in America and in Europe?
I think it's super important. I think that it's important to have people who you can identify with, to be able to know how to grow, because otherwise it's hard to have vision if you can't see things, right? Like literally see things.
Right.
And so, for me, I was like, I didn't have any expectation that, like, one day I'm going to find a design leader who's half Pakistani, half Filipino. It's not that, but the intersectionality became very important to me. Like, that person's not exactly like me, but they're enough like me that I can find some identifying characteristics. They're short like me. They have brown skin like me. They have curly hair like me. They speak like me. They grew up in Philly like me. They came from an inner city neighborhood like me. They, like whatever those things are, there's all this intersectionality that, I think that's what makes the world interesting, is how people intersect, right? And so it's hard to, it's easy for people, including myself, to just overgeneralize about a particular thing. But I think where it gets interesting is recognizing that, like, people aren't monoliths when in terms of race, in terms of gender, it's the intersectionality of people that make them interesting. And I think that's the part that's important, finding someone who, even through that intersectionality, you can identify with pieces of them. And I think that's what humans are. They're like combinations of, of all of the things that they experience: their race, their gender, their upbringing, their parenting, their home situation, their admirations, their hobby, like all of those things. And I think that's what's so interesting about, just about humans in general.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's even more apparent when you live in Dubai. Like my
How
last
so?
team, we had like people from Europe, India, the Middle East, Africa, like myself. And at my previous job, it was the same thing, right? Every day you're working with Italians, Australians, Indians, Pakistanis, and you learn to find those commonalities. And it really teaches you something, when you're designing for a wide range of customers as well. Because again, Dubai is quite culturally diverse. So how have you found that has helped you when you're building design systems that should cater for anyone and everyone?
Um, it's a tricky thing, because I think that there is value. But certainly there's value in inclusion, and inclusive design. I like that as an idea has picked up a lot of steam in the last, 5 years, 10 years, and people are
Yeah,
recognizing both the value and the detriment to not having it. So, like, I'm really glad to see that, catching. And I like, just as a design principle in general, like a universal principle, including people who are the target audience, that you're trying to design for. It makes a ton of sense in hindsight. It's like, well, of course, I wish we had realized that earlier as an industry. So that's important. I also think on the other side of that, I think there is value in exclusivity, right? I think there's value in knowing that product is made for you and it's not necessarily for everyone, right? And because it's not for everyone, the opportunity there is for something to be made specifically for you. I think what's tricky about that is that there's a really fine line between exclusivity and exclusion, and because there is a part of exclusivity that where you are intentionally saying this is not for a group of people, right? So when you're making a product, you might say, well, this is a product for designers. It's actually not a product for developers. You're not being exclusionary, or maybe you are, but you're being exclusive, is the way that I think about it. So when it comes to design systems, I sort of reject the notion that, like, every design system is for everyone. And that's one of the things that I've seen a lot, where people build design systems and design systems as if everyone is supposed to use them, right? Like, everybody wants to build their own version of material design. Material design is maybe one of the only design systems in the world that can truly say, like, we are really designing a product for everybody to be designing, right?
right.
But even if you look at some of the popular design systems out there, some of them do a really great job of being exclusive without being exclusionary. Polaris from Shopify is one of my favorites, my favorite recent examples, because right on the homepage of Polaris design system, they say this is a design system for the merchant experience for people who are
Yeah,
building in the Shopify admin.
yeah,
Well, great. Like, so that means if I'm just a regular consumer trying to build a consumer experience, am I stopped from using Polaris? I'm not. But right up front, they're like, I don't know, it might not work for you though, right? Like, just be aware you could try it. And so I think that's a really great balance of, they're not being exclusionary. They're not saying like, no, you're not allowed to use this. You're not allowed here. They're not gatekeeping. They're just saying like, this product is actually optimized for a particular thing, and if you're trying to do that thing, we're going to be really good for that. And if you're not trying to do that thing, you might
yeah,
experience a couple of speed bumps here.
yeah. That's very, very true. So we've got a few people from the Philippines on the stream, which is amazing.
Excellent.
We've got our first question from Naveen. I think you should have answered this question probably a million times in your career. So let's hear it. What is the best time to start creating a design system for a project? Is it the first thing you do, or test and create as you go along?
Okay, so I have a couple of different answers to this, a couple of different threads to this one. I always relate this to the question, like I remember hearing this somewhere. I wish I could remember the source. I remember hearing, somebody said like, if you want a tree in your front yard, when's the best time to plant the tree? And the answer is 20 years ago, right? Like that's the best time to plant the tree. When's the second best time to plant the tree? Right now.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that way about design systems. Like if you are especially if you're working in an enterprise, when is the best time to start a design system? About 3 or 4 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now. You can start right now. So that's one thread. The second thread on that is it the first thing you do? No, because I think that the purpose of a design system is to catalog the common things that go on. When you're
Right.
first starting on a fresh design, nothing's common yet. You don't
Yeah.
even know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So the way that I suggest to teams to make design systems is make products for users, right? That's your job. Your job is not to make systems or be efficient. Like that's not a job. Those are all side effects. Those are all byproducts of you doing a good job at your primary job, which is to make something for your users, right? Help them pay their water bills or, sign up for your service or whatever it is that your job is, do that thing. And then once you do that thing enough times and you go, I seem to be doing this thing over and over again, then you can create a system out of it, right? And I think where a lot of people go wrong is they try to pre-optimize that. They try to make it so that they never have debt ever, right? Well, I want to make it so that I can reuse anything possible, and it's an exercise in futility. It's like you just don't know what you need to optimize, and you spend more time doing optimizing than you do actually creating products that are valuable for your users. So, what I try to recommend is I try to be simple about it. Make things for your users. Once you find that you're doing things, my magic number is 3, right? 3 is the magic number. When you
Right.
find you're doing things more than 3 times in a row, 3 times the same way, all right, now it's time to get a system.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. The two threads. So I have a question relating to what you just said. So I'm working with my team currently to start building our design system. So we are basically doing a revamp of our application. And I came into the team about 2 months ago, and they didn't have a design system at all. Not even like an icon set in Sketch or anything.
Okay.
And
Yep.
yes, they're using Sketch. So one of the first things I did was to define our, for example, for colors, right? So we defined our colors based on the brand guidelines and started creating design tokens from day one. And the reason I wanted to do this was to get people comfortable with the idea of using tokens and not wait till later, but also to document our design decisions along the way, right? So all of the accessibility stuff that we're planning, the naming conventions, we're starting to think of them as we go along. So I guess my point is, when it comes to starting your design system process later, I would say, what do you think about studying aspects of the design system? Because obviously, design system is quite a large endeavor, right? Made up of different things, and you can start some of those things right at the beginning, like what we've decided to do. So, what would you say to that approach?
So there's two responses that I have to that. One is like, in theory, it makes a lot of sense. In theory, you start with a hypothesis and you test that hypothesis. That's how product design goes. That's how science goes, right? And
Yeah,
and so to start a project and say, all right, let's define a handful of colors that we will start to use, right? We're going to define red as our main color, and then yellow secondary, and then black and white and gray for some background things. Those are good theories. Um, Along the way, you will discover that those theories hold or those theories don't, right? You'll discover, we actually need another shade of blue here to, for links or for, for dark mode or whatever. Like, and so you'll add to
exactly.
that, modify that. You'll like, if that's the case, awesome. That's what a design system is supposed to be. A design system is a snapshot in time. It
Yeah,
says this is what we do right now. And that stuff is always going to evolve because it has to. It's supposed to. Your company is supposed to innovate, right? You're supposed to do new things for your users and for your companies, and so if you weren't doing that, like then you could use a very static system. But if you're continuing to innovate, then your system has to grow to, to match parity with that. So if that's the case, awesome. You can define some things at the start, holding it as a hypothesis, knowing that it's going to change. And this is the idea that lots of people talked about around like living design systems, always
Yeah.
changing, always evolving, always growing, and sometimes shrinking, right? Not just growing, but like sometimes shrinking. And so it's expanding and contracting with the needs of product. In reality, so that's the theory part. In reality, what a lot of people do with their design systems is they want to define it once so that they can use it forever. And that's the part that becomes dangerous, is like, no, we pick this red and we only are going to use this red. Yeah, but what about this use case that says we need another shade of red?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
what about
Exactly.
this user feedback that we're getting? And a lot of people say, well, no, we defined this earlier, so we have to stick to it. Like, to me, that's where the fault comes in the design system. The design system is supposed to change for the needs of your users. Right. And if it doesn't, then it's not really a design. It's a whatever. It's a
Yeah. It's
relic.
that guy. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah.
Dead Sea Scrolls at that point.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So we've got a couple of questions here. We'll start with Pedro Vicente. And I think this is like a talk on its own. What is the best approach to build a design system for a multi-brand? I think you could go on for hours on this one.
Totally. And yeah, like not only is it a talk on its own, it's like a course on its own. It's a book on its own. It's like it's a whole course of study,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I've got some courses out now. I have one course coming out with Dribble in a couple of weeks. And the most common question about that course is like, are you going to cover multi-brand and theming?
Right.
And the answer is no, because those are very complex topics to me. So, in what you're saying, there's a lot of people that do things the way that you just described, which I think makes sense, which is, before we do anything, let's define some tokens or some base colors or a set of decisions. Lots of people call them different things. Let's define some early decisions. Make some early brand decisions or things like that. And it's like that makes a lot of sense. But for me, tokens, theming, all of that kind of stuff is very complex. And I actually do that later. Whenever I work with teams, they're like, let's set up tokens first. I'm like, let's set up tokens in month 9. And they're like, why month 9? I'm like, because we don't even know how to build a system yet. And tokens and theming and multi-brand and all that stuff is a complex architecture. There's a thing called Gall's law in systems theory. John Gall was, I think he was a pediatrician or a pharmacist, something like that. And he he coined this law that says any complex system that works started from a simple system that works.
Yes.
Right? And so in order to build a complex system, you have to build a simple system that works and then scale it. The corollary to that is any complex system designed from scratch is destined to not work. It's destined to fail. And you have to start from scratch again. So in terms of multi-brand systems, I let multi-brand systems be emergent, right? And multi-brand systems to me follow a concept that a few people have talked about called the system of systems, right? A multi-brand system is not one system. It's actually a set of different systems interacting with each other, inheriting from each other, and overriding each other where necessary. To me, that's a complex architecture that, like, if you don't even have a way to change a button, and then all the other buttons change, like, don't even worry about multi-brand system yet. So get the simple system down and then start to scale that.
I love that. And I'll remember that.
Gall's law.
So we've got some more questions here from Arunava Sadhu. How do we measure the success of a design system?
That's a really important question. Arunava, thank you for asking that. So there's some usual suspect answers to that, right? There's like, how do we measure the success of the design system? The obvious answer, or the most popular answer that I've seen and given, is the holy grail for design systems tends to be adoption, right? If you make a design system and no one uses it, I mean, it's not really a system because it's not connected to anything. That's what defines what a system is connections. So if it's not connected to your product or your product design process, well, then it's just a library, right? It's not a design system at that point. It could be soon, but it's not actually hooked up to anything. So adoption is the first most obvious thing that you want to track. How many people are using this? How often are they using this? One of the things that's really tricky about measuring success for design systems in general is that we don't have good tooling in our industry for that, right? Most things where people are tracking success metrics, however they define them, are usually, a custom Airtable or a Google Sheet or, something like that, where people are just manually checking something every week, every month, every quarter, whatever cadence you have. So that makes adoption difficult. Hoping that we see more products coming out around tracking, around adoption, around analytics, around those kinds of things. I know I've had some conversations with a few people recently who are making things like that. So I'm hopeful that like this stuff is going to happen and be more prevalent. I just haven't seen a lot of it yet. So it makes it really difficult. So adoption is the first one to track. But then outside of that, I think there are other things that are more specific to your organization that you should track. So, if you're just tracking any metrics of success for any design system, you're going to want to track adoption. You're going to want to track, how many bugs do we have on projects where we don't use the design system versus how many bugs do we have on projects we do use the design. So you want to do a lot of comparison of what happens on projects where we do use the design system and what happens on projects where we don't. You want to look at QA time. You want to look at bugs filed. You want to look at things like that. And that applies to every design system. Then the second layer that I put on top of that is there's probably something at your company that is really specific that the design system can do. So for example, if your company, if you sell wireless plans or telecommunication plans or something like that, if you work for a company like that, well, track how much the design system has increased signups, for the plans, or track how much faster the sign up process is because of the design system, right? And that's something that's going to be very exclusive to your company or your team that other teams are not going to have. It's just going to be irrelevant. So I would suggest once you get past the standard set of metrics around design systems, which is around adoption, which is around efficiency and consistency and things like that, start to tie your design system metrics to actually your company's metrics, right? If you can make your design system metrics a subset of your company's metrics, now you're actually creating a system not just on the technical side, but on the organizational side. That's really important. You're tying your design system to the goals of your company.
Amazing. And we have an elephant in the room, Dan, the giveaway.
Oh
So
yeah,
tell
the
us a
giveaway.
bit about what we're giving away, and then I will explain how we're giving it away.
Yeah, totally. I forgot about that, so thank you for reminding me. So I have a couple of different products that I found to be helpful to people. I've gotten some good feedback on them, so I want to give them away here for anybody who they might be helpful to. So we're doing two giveaways. We'll pick two winners. The first giveaway is for my design system course called "Make Design Systems People Want to Use." It's an overview of design system course. It's kind of a beginner to intermediate level. It's a little bit more on the intermediate level. It's for people who are managing teams. It's for people who are leads, lead designer, lead engineer, lead product person. And it just helps you get a good sense of the ecosystem of a design system. So it gets into a little bit of the technical bits of a design system. How do they actually work? What is actually involved in it? But it talks about some of the things that we've talked about here in more detail. How do you measure success? What do you look for? What does the workflow look like? So I'm giving away a license to that course. I normally sell that course for $499 US. The corporate license is $899 US for a whole team. So I'm giving away that. That's one. And then the second one is my workbook, which is an advanced workbook for design system teams. So that is it's called Design System in 90 Days. That's for people who are like, I get all the theory. I have all the, I don't need like a primer. I just need steps. Like, what do I do? So the book doesn't have a lot of explanation. It doesn't have a lot of a theory. It has a lot of do this and do this and do this. It's 52 steps on how, if you were to hire me or my team to work on a design system, these are the 52 things that we would do, in the course of 3 months. So it's a very tactical, there's not a lot of fluff in it. It's a very workbooky and worksheety. It's a lot of plays that you can run to make sure that you're creating a connected, true design system at your company. So if you don't know much about design systems, that workbook is not for you. But if you're like, I'm pretty boned up on it, but I really just need somebody to tell me what to do, the book will give you a lot of direction.
Unbelievable. And how much is the book worth?
Oh, the book is a $349 book, so not cheap book. $349 US. So probably more expensive than any book you might find at the bookstore, because it's the culmination of a lot of my knowledge and the knowledge of my teams, for many years of working on design systems.
Amazing. You're very gracious to have this giveaway. Thank you so much, Dan. So how we're going to do it is like we did last time on the last stream where we gave something away, is the person with the most engagement. In this case, the people with the most engagement will get the book. And it's very obvious through the comments who's engaging the most. So once we decide, we will DM the winners on LinkedIn with the code, right, Dan?
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So we've got a few questions piling up here. Let's start with Isaac. Isaac is actually our last winner of the giveaway.
Nice.
Giveaway.
Congrats, Isaac.
Thanks to see. Good to see you. So he's saying, as someone who has been in the industry for a long time, have you ever faced the imposter syndrome? And if so, what was your approach in handling it?
Yeah. So in terms of imposter syndrome, um, and this relates to what we were talking about earlier. My upbringing, who I am, my
Yeah.
heritage, all of that. Like, I've always been pretty secure in who I am. So I don't know that I felt like I'm someone else. The definition of imposter syndrome is like I feel like I'm someone else, right? Like I feel like I'm just playing a character. So I've never
Mhm.
really felt like I've played a character because I'm like, I mean, I am who I am. Um, so that part is like, I don't know that I identify with that. The other part, though, the part about like, am I qualified for this? Do I know what I'm doing? I mean, that happens all the time. Like, I tell my wife all the time. Every time I start with a new client or a new customer, I'm like, am I even good at this? Like, can I even do this? And I'm like, and I know that I can. And I try to do a good job of actually logging things and revisiting them. Like I have a lot of things like, I love Time Hop as an app. I love things that remind me of things that I've done in the past because that to me is the stuff that helps combat the imposter syndrome. It's like, oh right,
Yeah.
I did do this. I am good at this. Like I have done this before, and it like allays a lot of that fear. So I have that every single time I work with a new client. I have that every time I get on stage to do a new talk. I had it right before we're on here. I get jitters, I get nervous, I get, it's adrenaline, it's all that stuff. So I feel that every single time. I've just learned to be comfortable with that because I've done it enough times. So, I wait for it. Every time I go to speak at a conference, about 30 minutes before, my hands will start to shake. I'll start to get cold. I'll start to get more alert. I got to pee a little bit. Like, all these things. It's like I'm like, yeah, these are nerves. This is my body saying like, beware. This is a potentially dangerous situation for you. I'm like, okay, thanks, body. Thank you for letting me know that. Like, here I am. And there's some times where I've sort of grown addicted to that, right? That's like because it's an adrenaline rush. So in terms of imposter syndrome and all that, I get a piece of that, which is just kind of questioning like, am I really good at this? And so the thing that helps me is I keep a log of my wins. I have a
Wow.
note in my note taking app that I'm just like things that I do that
Wow.
I'm proud of. I keep it. I don't share all those things. Like it feels weird. It feels egotistical. So, and it feels like not humble. But like I need those reminders for me. So I keep notes of that. Of those things. I try to receive compliments when I get them. I try to be like present about them and really take them to heart that like people are appreciating things. I try to give them as well and be grateful about it. I've recently started a journaling practice where I have a daily recap that I do at the end of every day. Where I write down things that I'm thankful for the day, and I write down things that were a win from the day. So a lot of these things are good antidotes, I think, to overcoming at least some of that imposter syndrome
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very powerful. The fact that you record your wins. That's something I don't think enough of us do. We've got an amazing question here from Amjed about localization, internationalization of design systems. How would you, what would you say to people that need to localize or internationalize their design system?
Um, so one of the things, so this is generally my design system approach, and I think just my work approach, right? So I'll start general, and then we'll see if we can get more specific on that. It's tough, doing in general. Doing two things is always more difficult than doing one thing, I think. So if you have to build a design system in one language, that's tough. You have to build a design system in two languages. That's not just
Oof.
doubly tough; it's like triply tough, right? And
Yeah.
then you have to localize or nationalize in multiple languages, and like it becomes very difficult. So um, what I generally teach teams whenever I start with them is I give them two principles to start. The first one is it comes from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that principle is begin with the end in mind. Right. So what are we trying to do? Before we even start, not to have the whole plan, don't not to have it all planned out, but just begin with it in mind. So eventually we want to build a design system that works in 10 languages or 20 languages or 2 languages or whatever that is. So we begin there. Like this is what we're after, which is daunting and makes you feel overwhelmed. That's the point of it. The point of it is to go like, okay, there's a long way to go, and someone here has the vision to see that far out. So that's daunting, and it's supposed to be daunting. And then the thing that gets you grounded, the next thing, the next piece that I generally give to teams, this is the second part of it, is I think was it Sun Tzu or Confucius, or I think it's an old Chinese proverb, which is that a journey of 1,000 steps begins. I'm sorry, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Right.
Yes.
So it's like, cool, take one step, because you're not going to get 1,000 miles if you don't take the first step, right? And then you can take another step. So tying all these kinds of answers together, like, how would you build a localized, internationalized design system? One language at a time. And the tough part about that is not the technical nature of that, it's the tolerance of it. The tough part of that is you launch the first language or the second language, and what most people see is the 8 languages that they didn't get to. They don't see the wins in the 2. They don't
Oh,
see that, like, we did 2 freaking languages here, and that is
yeah.
amazing, and we should be
Yeah.
proud of that, and that's a big achievement. What they see is, no, but it's not good unless we have all 10. So it's so binary. Right? It's so like, well, we have a bad design system until we get to the perfect one. There's no middle ground in between there. And so, that's what I would recommend is, like, internationalization is hard, but you can't do 10 languages if you haven't done one. And you can't do 4 languages if you haven't done 2. Right. So I
Exactly.
think it's one step at a time. I would do it one language at a time. Once you get to language number 3, number 4, you might find some efficiencies that allow you to do 2 at a time, maybe, because you go, okay, I get the patterns now. That's the efficiency of scale. But until then, I would say go one at a time, scope it out. You're trying to do 10 languages, that might take you 10 years. Do one a year, right? That's okay. Like, it's okay to do that. Like, we should aspire to be the best that we can, but we shouldn't hold ourselves to that being the minimum standard. That, like, what incredible pressure that is. And that, I think that's the stuff that gives us things like imposter syndrome. And, I've heard of people having heart attacks at work. Like,
Oh, what?
what? Doing design system work? Are you kidding? Like, we're not, it's not that deep for us. If you are saving lives, if you are a critical worker, if, like, those are jobs that are stressful, those are jobs that, like, mad props to people who have those jobs. That's not us. Most of us. That's not most. We sit at computers. We make components. Like we can pace ourselves. In a way that is
Yes.
kind to ourselves and each other.
Yeah, that your answer actually reminds me of this joke going around on, I think, TikTok, Instagram. Have you seen this clip of Arnold Schwarzenegger in a podcast?
No.
So someone asks him, he says, it's very hard to make your first million. So start with your second million.
Great. I love it.
And then he says it as a joke, and everyone in the podcast is like, "Wow, that's so profound." And then he pauses for like 30 seconds, like, "Guys, I'm joking." Just like, how do
Hilarious.
you do localization and internationalization? Don't start with your first language. Start with your second language.
Right. It's so fun. It reminds me. I think it was a commercial that I saw as a kid, but I remember I think it was an orange juice commercial where, like, these 2 kids were like, okay, let's split the glass of orange juice. You drink half and I drink half. So the first kid drinks the whole glass, and the second kid's like, why did you drink the whole glass? We agreed to split it, and the first kid goes, my half was at the bottom. It's the same idea.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, we've got more questions. More questions. Let's try to get through them. So we've got a question from Isaac. What is your take on AI in the design industry?
Super
Especially
timely.
let's focus on AI with respect to design systems.
Yeah, totally. So AI in general, I'll talk about AI in general and then AI in like specifically as it relates to design systems. I think AI is an incredibly powerful technology. Um, I think that it is, because it's so powerful, it's very scary and it's very exciting at the same time, right? Um, I think that it will displace a lot of jobs. I think it already has displaced a lot of jobs. I think in general, automation has always done that, from the history of industry.
Yeah,
So to think that we are immune from that, that feels a little bit naive, at least to me.
yeah,
I'm excited for what it's worth. I'm excited about AI and what it opens up for us in terms of design systems. And I'll say why. In general, I should also say that I'm generally an optimistic person, so I'm not the kind of person who would be pessimistic about something like that. Sometimes to a fault, So I'll admit that bias there. I think the part of the point of design systems is to take work away from us anyway through automation, right?
Yeah.
That's the benefit of having a system anywhere, not just a design system for tech, but just a system in general, right? I have a system for where my clothes go. It makes it easy for me to put my laundry away, right? In some ways, that's automation. Once I have that system, I could outsource that system to someone else. I could hire someone. I could pay my kids to use that system, right? And I do that. That's how I train my kids to learn how to, they do my laundry because they use my system, and I pay them for it. And they learn how to make money and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's value in the idea of automation. I think the same is true when it comes to design systems. What I think, the way that we alleviate some of the fears around it, I think, is that what are we automating? What is the thing that is worth automating? And I think the thing that is worth automating for design systems has never been the good work, the important work, the fun work. It's never been that. The point of design systems is to automate the boring work, the work that we don't want to do. Get that off my plate, and so, my friend Josh Clark, he wrote this great article about, it's called the most exciting design systems are boring, right? It's a great article that says all the boring stuff. That's what a design system is supposed to be. I said it earlier. Design systems are the common things: buttons, footers, cards, headers. All the stuff that we don't want, all the stuff that we do over and over again. That we're like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this over and over again? So if a machine does that, it's fine. Let the robots do that part. Let computers do that part. That part is fine. To outsource, and it frees us up to do things. What I think it frees us up to do is have accidents. I just don't think that the computers are good at having accidents. They're really good at not having accidents. That's why we outsource things to them, because they can be more efficient. But the job of a design system is not just efficiency, right? It's not just, it's to unlock innovation too. And we cannot be innovative if we're just designing buttons all day, right? I've met with designers who are like, the last 5 years of my career have been just been designing forms and tables. It's like, yeah, okay,
jumping around different companies, right?
Yep, exactly. They jump from company to company and they do the same exact job, and then think that that's job security. And it's that's not job security, right? That's just you being comfortable, right? And so yes, there's security and comfort for sure. I'm not dismissing that, but I think once it frees you up, what can you do? And that notion is scary too, right? That's when I work with design system teams and I say, hey, you no longer have to do this. Half of them are like, great, and actually sometimes the same half of them are like, but what do I do instead? So we can't take work away from people and not replace it. I think that's the thing, is we have to talk more as an industry about what do we replace that with. And we don't talk about that a lot. We talk about the efficiency and we talk about removing the work, but what do we get to do? And that's why when I work with teams, I talk to them about that stuff a lot. What do you get to do? Custom art direction, photo shoots, illustration, more animation, better documentation, more focus on accessibility. Every designer, every engineer has a list of stuff that they never got to because, I'll do it at the end if we have time. Everybody has that list.
Yeah, so, at the top of that list is research.
Exactly. Stuff like that. Yes. Yeah. So that's the stuff that you get to do. That's to me, that's where AI becomes real helpful, is AI take away all the other stuff so that I can get to that list. The other thing I'll plug here is I see, Sylvia's in the chat here. The Into Design Systems community has an event coming up. I think it's a free event on automation and design systems. I think it's at the end of February, if I have that right. So go register for that. You can find it on LinkedIn. I'm excited for that. I'm going to be joining that and listening in to see what I can learn. But I think that that's an important topic, and I'm glad that there are people who are talking about it, especially recently.
Absolutely. Hey, Sylvia, that's the good call out there. Good to see you, Sylvia. Question from Robert. Any tips on how to make a design system audit more fun?
Interesting question. How to make it more fun?
Yeah.
I'm going to make some assumptions in here about to make it more fun for the team doing it or the people receiving it. So I don't know. Maybe I'll answer both of those. I'm not sure which one. But Robert, if you want to chime in and say which one of those you were specifically asking about, it'll help kind of direct my answer here. But how to make design system audits more fun. So an audit by design, I think, is dry, right? An audit is just you looking through everything. And that sounds boring and monotonous and all that stuff. I've done audits before at my agency, SuperFriendly, that I used to run. We had a service called the Design System Diagnostic. And part of the thing that we did with that diagnostic is we benchmarked, and we made it interesting because we put a ton of graphs in there. We put a lot of relative things in there, right? So it wasn't just here's your score for your design system. It's because what does a 74 out of 100 mean anyway? I don't know. we made it relative to other things. So we said, here's your score, but here's also the score of, we actually put material design through the ringer. We put Polaris through our audit. We put Salesforce Lightning Design System through our audit, and here's what they scored, and here's where they were. And so to me, what makes it more fun is knowing what you can do from a result of the audit. I've paid for audits before, with other products that I've had, and what has made it more fun for me as a receiver of that is just knowing, like, oh, I can take action, and that action is easy, right? And sometimes that action can be silly and can be fun. So I think that an audit itself, might be dry, but what you can do with the results of that audit can be really fun. You can be silly there, you can be playful there, you can inspire people there. So I think it's about what comes out of that audit is the fun part. So I'm not sure if there's anything that you can do in the audit process, although I don't know, just saying it out loud, perhaps you can make that somehow a collaboration thing or a collaborative thing, an auditing thing. You can divvy it up between people, you can host hackathons, you can make a whole event, you can run prizes for it. Actually, I'm talking myself into a really fun process for auditing. Like, you can make it a thing that people want to participate in. The very minimum of that is, like, I don't know, just like buy a pizza, and invite people into a room and go, like, hey, everybody, we're going to audit, you get free pizza and beer. Like, that might make it fun enough. Maybe the process isn't fun of auditing, but the community around it is fun. So
Exactly.
I think there are a lot of opportunities there, to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Great answer. We've got an important question here from Openyemi. I think he's Nigerian from his name. And I think it's a really important question. So he says, my team lead, who is a front end engineer, doesn't see the need to create a design system. How do I make him see the importance and value of creating one for our organization?
So if you haven't noticed this about me, sometimes specific questions like this are really hard. So I try to zoom out one level. Sometimes when you zoom out one level, the answer is easier. So the question that I want to answer that applies here, it's not about how do you make a front end engineer who doesn't want to create a design system see the importance of a design system. It's basically, how do you change anyone's mind? Right?
Exactly.
Because if you can figure that out, then you can figure out how it applies to the situation. And how do you change someone's mind is you have to find the incentive for them. If they have no incentive, why would they do anything different? Right? Humans, by nature, by survival, our brains are wired to do this. We are lazy. Right? We don't want to expend any more energy than we have to. There's a name for that. I think Zapp's law or Zapp's effect, something like that. That, like, we choose the path of least resistance because it's the least taxing on our minds and bodies. So if I don't have to change is a hard process for our brains and minds to go through. If I don't have to change, why would I? So if a front end engineer is like, what good would that do me? And you don't have a compelling argument, well, of course they're not going to change. Of course they're not going to do it. And so part of that, how do you get people to change, is they have to feel some pain generally. They have to feel some pain, and that's part of the incentive to change. So if your front end engineer is like, I am spending way too long on this work, then that's where the design system steps in as a solution. But if the front end engineer doesn't feel any pain, they don't need a solution, right? So you're presenting a solution without a problem. So I think that's the thing to look for first. Is like, what's the thing that they are having trouble with, and then can you frame the design system as the solution to that problem that they're having? If you can do that, that's going to be a successful sell.
Exactly. I love that. If you can frame the design system to solve one of his problems, you'll win him over. I love that. So we've got two questions here, and we'll group them together. So Arun is asking, how are accessibility and inclusive design considerations incorporated into the design system? And Avi is saying she has ADHD, so systems can be overwhelming. So she would also love to get your thoughts on, accessible and inclusive design systems.
Yeah, sure. So I can't speak to the ADHD part. I don't have ADHD. I'm not well versed in it. I'm not well versed in how to work with people who have ADHD. I have a book on my list. I think it's called Neurodivergent at Work, that I'm trying to learn more about. So I'm not sure that I have a lot to say there. That is. I don't have any experience there, so I want to punt on that one a little bit. I can talk a little bit about accessibility and inclusive design, and things like that. Accessibility is the easier one, because I think there's more precedent for it. So if you look at a lot of design systems that are out there, material design, Polaris, Lightning, almost all of them have some sort of accessibility principles or accessibility statement or accessibility approach.
Yeah.
Some of that is well intentioned, well intended. Some of that is born of fear, right? Some of that is born of lawsuits. I know a lot of companies who have really stepped up their accessibility practice because they've gotten sued because of it. And so, because of all of those factors, what I've seen in accessibility, as especially not an accessibility expert, so I welcome anybody else to chime in for that as well. But what I've seen so far with accessibility is a lot of it tends to be about compliance. A lot of it tends to be about like, here's some
Yeah.
boxes that we need to check. Make sure that those boxes are checked, which to me, I'm like, that's a good thing. That's a baseline level, right? That's not like the best you can do in terms of accessibility, but it's like, at least make sure your bases are covered. So things like color contrast guidelines show up a lot. Things like making sure text is at a readable size, making sure that images have alternative text, making sure that people who have different abilities are able to interact with the content in a particular way, in their own way, whether that's a screen reader or that's an assistive device or that's a web browser or that's a mobile device, whatever those things are. I see a lot of design systems have content and guidelines about those kinds of things.
Right.
Where I think inclusive design is helpful in filling those gaps is inclusive design is not about compliance. Inclusive design, as I understand it, is more about the process. It's more about what you do at the beginning, not what you do at the end, right? So accessibility tends to be, and not that this is the what it's supposed to be, but this is just kind of the precedent, of how it's been, is people go, okay, I've designed something. Now let me look at my checklist, and go through the checklist and see, and there are lots of tools that are helpful for that kind of thing. I love that there are companies that are starting around this. Like one of the most popular ones and my favorites is Stark. Stark is really helping people to transform from accessibility as a thing at the end to inclusive design as part to accessibility as part of the process, and then eventually
Exactly.
to inclusive design as the start, as that. So I think inclusive design is filling in a lot of the gaps there, because inclusive design is about, before we even make anything, how do we think about this with the widest range possible, right? How do we think about this from perspectives that we may not have thought of by default,
Yeah.
and then if you do that, if you make that part of the process of using the design system, then it actually takes care of the compliance stuff, right? You get those checkboxes checked by default because you've already thought of those things ahead of time, as opposed to like, oh, I forgot about this, at the end. Okay, let me go back and retrofit some of these things. So I think they are at two ends of a continuum. Accessibility generally tends to be at the end, not that it's supposed to be. That's just where it's been. But inclusive design, I think, is really helping people to go, when you're designing an interface from scratch, you can think about who needs to use this, how are we going to make it so that most people can access it, and then what role does the design system play in that. So that's part of the workflow, in the product design process, of which the design system is a tool, of which inclusive design is the tool as well.
Amazing, amazing. A question from Amjad: how can we ensure that the design system is maintainable over time?
So we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's a tough question. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And one thing I want to emphasize here is maintenance means something different to different people. So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. If we're talking about a design system as like, well, we made it and then we left it alone and now we just need to do tune-ups on it, like, it's not really like, it's fun, but that's hard to do, right? But a design system is a thing that you use, so it's gonna have wear and tear after a while, right? It's like maintaining a car that's been sitting in the garage for 6 months is very different than maintaining a car that you've been driving for 6 months. It's a whole
Yeah.
different process of maintenance. So
Yeah.
a design system that is being used all the time, chances are you're not gonna in 6 months go like, oh yeah, I guess we should maintain it. Chances are you're gonna spot the problems way before. When you're driving it, you're like, I hear a weird sound coming from my right tire. Like when you're driving it, and the people who take care of their cars, right? It's not maintenance anymore; it's care. So they are proactive about making sure that those things don't happen. So that's the best end of the continuum for a design system. Is you're not maintaining it, you're not waiting for something to break or something to wear down before you actually go and fix it. You actually are proactive about it and going, I see what things we're going to need. I see what things we're supposed to do, and I have regular things that I do. I get my oil changed every 3 months, right? I get my all those things. You have the same thing for your design system too. So one of the things that I recommend to a lot of teams is a cadence of 3 to 1. So every 3 weeks, for 3 weeks, you do what I call flow weeks, which you work on product with the design system, you work with product teams, and then every fourth week of the month, I call a systems week, and that's the week that you go, we're just going to do tune-ups, we're going to do diagnostics, we're going to make sure everything is good, we're going to look across the organization and audit components for contribution potential. We're going to do all that stuff, and those are proactive things that you can do, to keep your car running, so that like you don't find that my brakes are shot one day and now you have a major bill at the end of that month. So Audibit is being proactive about that. If you're using your design system regularly, it's much easier to be proactive and to see the things that are coming, before they break down, before they actually do break down.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And I've got a question about the future of design systems. What excites you at the moment when it comes to where design systems are going, and the whole industry as a whole?
I mean, honestly, a lot of the automation stuff and AI stuff, like, because I think that the promise of design systems was always like, stop doing the boring work, right?
Mm.
But as an industry, we're still doing the boring work, right? And
Yes.
I don't have a judgment on that. That's just where we are. Um, but one day soon, like, we're gonna get out of the boring work, and now is the time to start thinking about, well, what do we do? Like, what do we do at that time? Because we don't want to arrive at that time and all of a sudden go like, I don't have anything to do. I have a friend who used to run his own agency, and one of the things that he did, he wrote a great blog post on this. I think he put it on Medium. His name's Carl Smith, and he wrote this article called his irrelevant strategy. So what he was trying to do was, as the owner of his agency, as the CEO, he tried to make himself irrelevant by giving away all the things that he was doing. So he's
Yeah.
the one running payroll for everybody. So he gave that to his COO. He was the one who was, in every critique, he gave that to his creative director. He was the so, and he found that he could never become irrelevant, right? Because he was scared at, and he was like, well, that's why I'm doing it, is because I'm scared of actually becoming irrelevant. But he found that there was always something new that was exciting to him. Right. So
Right.
like, when you give away the stuff, you find other things to do, those things you just like more. Right. Like, so that's a way of optimizing your work. And I think design systems are supposed to do the same thing. If you hate designing buttons, but they're necessary evil, well, outsource that to the design system, and at some point, our irrelevant strategy actually just makes us irrelevant on the things that we don't want to do, and
Yeah.
then we can become available and then eventually relevant on the things that we do want to do. So I am looking for a future where we can minority report and interface, with our hands, using gestures, by going like, give me the button component and the slider component and this thing and that thing. It doesn't really look like, okay, let's put a layer of blue on top of that. Okay, that's pretty cool. Like, just designing with our words, in seconds, because we have all these things like, I feel like that's there for us, and we have prototypes of that. We've seen Airbnb do prototypes of that 2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We've
The
seen,
creative bit. Yeah.
we've seen Jordan Singer build and his team build Figma plugins that you type text into a box and it generates an interface for it. Like, we're
Yeah.
close. We're a few years away, let's say. And so that's what's exciting to me, is like, once we get all that stuff, what are we going to do? And more importantly, are we going to use that power for good? Are we going to use that for evil? So I think ethics and morality becomes a big topic, more than we've discussed ever. I'm encouraged that there are lots of people writing books about that, exploring those topics, ethics in AI. Like, I think those are going to be more and more relevant and more important to us, because we are, sometimes begrudgingly, but certainly marching toward a future where we can kind of be able to do whatever we want really quickly. So what do we actually do with that?
Amazing. And speaking of the future, you've got two young children. So my question is, would you encourage them to go into design? And if so, what aspects of design do you think are future-proof enough that you could encourage your kids to do?
So I definitely have a bias there, right? Because I am a designer, and my bias is also that, like, I'm a kid from a low income neighborhood in Philly. I'm a brown kid from a low income neighborhood in Philly. My parents were immigrants when they came to the country. They didn't make a lot of money, and I saw them grow, and gain wealth and success, and all that kind of stuff. And to me, design has been that for me, right? It's like, just because I can push some pixels around a screen, like, people will have me on live streams and like fly me around the world and pay me money to like work with their team. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how fortunate that scenario is, and I'm very grateful for it. And I try not to take that for granted. And so that's what I want for my kids. I want my kids to have some skill that people value, and people will go, we will literally fly you around the world to be able to work with you or talk to you, or like, how humbling and how amazing is that? So the design was that for me. I don't know if design will be that for them, but I encourage them to find whatever their version of that is. For my
Wow.
older daughter, it might be design because she and a friend she's very entrepreneurial. She and her friend at school have a company selling bracelets. They make bracelets for other kids, and they made a ton of money. She just started a
Yeah.
new company drawing tattoos on people with permanent marker. And she's made good money doing that at school. And she came home one day and she was like, "Dad, how do I make like a logo? We need like a logo for our business. How do we do that?" And so I was like, okay. So I grabbed 5 books off my bookshelf. Here's some logo books, it was hard for me to not treat her like I treated one of my apprentices. Okay, design 100 logos, draw 100 logos now. Like we'll do revisions or do it on Friday. But like I'm trying to feed some of the interest that they have, wherever that is. For my younger daughter, that's around gymnastics. And also for my older daughter, even though it's around design, it's for her that's theater. So they have these things that I'm like what I've learned how to do is be good at a skill, so maybe that's the thing that I can teach them how to do is whatever that skill is, here's how you can be good at that skill too. So I wish that for them. I wish that for every person on earth, because I think the world would be a better place. So I do hope that I don't encourage them to get in design. I don't discourage them from getting in design. I hope that they find something that they love and that they value and that can make a good life for them, and I wish that for everybody.
Amazing. Would you believe we're at the 1 hour mark?
Oh my gosh, that went fast.
I know it did. I did. So I think we're gonna close it off with any last words from Dan. I think we had a good question here from Robert, I believe. And Sylvia, actually, he was asking, what are you up to? What can we look forward to in terms of content? And I think this is also part of the question I wanted to ask about the next phase of your life right now, which is Dan Mall Teaches. Tell us about
Mm.
Dan Mall Teaches, what you're up to, and how we can get involved.
Thank you for asking that, and thank you for everybody in the chat. Honestly, I don't know. I'm figuring stuff out, and that's partly why I did that. That's partly why I shut down an agency that I ran for 10 years. It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. There was nothing wrong with it, but I did it for 10 years. So I'm like, I kind of want to do another thing for 10 years because I only have so many 10-year chunks left in my life, I think. So, so what I realized is that I like teaching, and what I'm experimenting with right now is at what scale, one-on-one, one to a few, one to a lot of people. So I'm doing a lot of things there that I'm just trying to see what resonates with me and what resonates with people. I have a new Instagram channel. I have a new YouTube channel because I'm like, are those ways that I could teach at scale? Are those good ways? Is that too much effort for me? Is that not enough effort for me? Is that helpful for people? Do they not care about that? So a way that I would love feedback on that is if anyone has any opinions about that. If you want more from me on something or less from me on something, I'll take both of those feedback. If you're like, stop the stupid Instagram post, well, great, that's good feedback for me. That's helpful. But I'm experimenting and learning a lot about things that I haven't learned before, and I love learning. I love learning and teaching. To me, they're a cycle, they're a virtuous cycle. So anything that I can teach, anything that I can learn, I love doing that. So I'm spending a lot of time doing that right now. I'm learning a lot about email marketing and automation, and like how to do that. I've never learned that before. I'm
Yeah.
making a bunch of mistakes there where like people pay for a product and I just send it to my whole email list accidentally for free, right? Like stuff like that. Like, whoops, sorry. Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'm messing up in people's favor, maybe. I don't know. So I'm definitely messing up a bunch because a lot of this is new for me. I would like to have as much impact on people as I can and help them to have some of the things that I've been lucky to have, which is a pretty decent life. Doing things that I enjoy, doing things that aren't very difficult in the grand scheme of things. I'm not like laboring. I'm not struggling. I wish that for everybody, and so I want to help make that possible to the extent that I can. I think that design is a good way to do that for a lot of people because it's very valued in our world right now. And so I want to help people do that in a way that doesn't they don't kill themselves working. And so that's what I'm experimenting with. That's what I'm up to right now. As you can tell, it's super messy. I'm in that early messy stage. It's a startup, and so I'm in that early, like, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Trying to figure it out by running a bunch of experiments. So if any of you want to run experiments with me, if you want to, give me feedback, like I will take feedback on any channel, DM me on any one of those things. Just don't email me. Can never email people back. DM me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, I don't know, whatever it is. And I would love anything that anybody has to say, any feedback that you all have.
Unbelievable. That's a great way to end it. So I think we have two clear winners of the giveaway then. The
All right.
first and very obvious one is your Filipina countryman or woman, Avi Pili. So yeah,
Excellent. Congratulations, Avi.
she's been really active on the comments there, and she's asked us a lot of questions. She's even answered some other people's questions. So thanks so much, Avi. And the second winner is Robert. He's been messaging from the beginning. I think so you know who you are. I'll say your last name, Robert. I'll at least attempt to. Laschevoski. Laschevoski. Okay,
Excellent.
cool.
Congratulations, Robert.
Congrats, guys. Congrats. So I'll DM you and we will be sending you one of those two gifts. I'll have conversations with each of you to determine what level you are, and then we'll give you the appropriate course. Unbelievable. So thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks for taking the time. It is good to speak to you face to face, and I think this was very useful to a lot of people. So I think
Likewise.
this is a nice taste of Dan Mall teaches.
I love
What
it.
you can expect.
Thank you. Thanks for creating this platform and making this possible. This is a lot of fun.
Unbelievable. Amazing. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everyone who came online. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.
Thanks all. Bye.